So once you have Git installed, you want to make sure that it's there by typing git -- version into the terminal. We see that Git version 2.3.0 is installed on our computer, so we're good to go. If we want to start a new Git project, we'd first need to choose a repository to work in. So let's go over, for me, I'm going to go into my documents folder and the development folder. I have a dedicated development folder that I do all of my development work in. It just makes it easy for me to keep everything in one place. So to start using Git in a new project, what you need to do is create a folder for that project and initialize Git. So first, to initialize it as a Git repository, what you're going to do is type in git, G-I-T, init, I-N-I-T, like initialize. And once you type that in, it'll give you a whole bunch of information. It'll also tell you, what you can use for your branches and things like that. But anyhow, it sets you up with a new Git branch. You'll see that it says Git master. Common names of the main branches like master, main, trunk, whatever you want to call it, you can just rename it. So let's go ahead and name it to main. So as that is a bit more common nowadays. So what you do, git branch m, and we'll call it main. And now our main branch is called that. It's just called main. Awesome. So say we wanted to go ahead and create a few files and then later commit them to our version control history. The way that you would go about creating a file using the terminal is the command mkdir. Now what mkdir stands for is make directory. Mk, make, dir, directory. And a directory is just another type of folder. So we'll say make directory, and we'll call this directory git files, just for argument's sake. Awesome. So the fact that it refreshed and nothing different happened, that meant it worked. So let's change directory into the git files folder. Awesome, we're in there, and it is also part of our repository. And now what we want to do is create a couple of files. So let's use the command touch. That is one of the command line commands. You say touch, and that is actually how you create a new file. So you could put touch, and let's do an index.html. We'll do a styles.css, and we'll do an app.js. These are all empty files. We're just creating them for the purposes of this tutorial. So let's create them. And again, it just refreshed, nothing happened. That means we're good. But how could we check without going in and checking through the navigator? Well, what we can do is press ls, which remember is list, to list out all the files in this current directory. So ls and enter, and you'll see we have an app.js, index.html, and a styles.css. Awesome, off to a great start. Now, the next thing that we want to talk about is how to save these files to the version control, right? So we've established these files as existent. Imagine that we actually went in and put some code into them. Now we want to save them to our version control. So every time you make a somewhat major change, you want to commit it and make sure that it's basically saved to a version, and you can always go back to that version if what you're working on next doesn't work out. But how would we go about doing this? Well, there are two ways we can do this. Let's go about the first way, which is the sort of more traditional way. This is going through the command line and using these different commands in order to actually take these files and include them at their current state into a commit. So what this looks like is we'll type in the word git again. Everything that you access with git requires you to put git first. It's basically telling the computer hey, I want you to use this software called git, and then I want you to do this command that is within the software's capability. So let's type in git, G-I-T, and then the command we're going to use is add. So we want to add some files to our commit, and we can do one of two things. We can put git add and a period, which will add all of the files, or if we don't want to add all of the files, we can do git add and then type out the name of the file. So say I only want to add app.js, I would type in git add app.js, and it would add that to our list of files that are ready to be committed. So awesome, we've added app.js to the list of files to commit. But how do we know it's there? How are we sure? We can simply type in git status, and it will tell us the list of files that have been staged, ready to be committed, right? It's as if you're staging something you're staging a house and you're about to show it. The same concept. You're staging these files ready to commit them. So let's type in git status, and see, we just got a bunch of information here. So it says we're on the branch main, no commits yet because we haven't done any commits yet, changes to be committed, new file, app.js. and you can use git rm removed cache file to unstage. Untracked files, you can use git add file name to include these files and what will be committed. And there's a markdown file that I have, and then the index.html and the styles.css. Awesome. All right, so we know that what we did worked. Let's go ahead and make this app.js file part of our first git commit. So in order to do that, we type in git commit, and then we'll use the M flag, which a flag is when you type something dash and then the letter, and we'll say that'll be this is going to be our message to include. So we'll say git commit message will be added JavaScript. So maybe we added some JavaScript to the project. Usually these messages are a bit more descriptive and explain why you've made this commit. So usually you want to, as I said, commit early and commit often. So we say git commit m added JavaScript, and we should hit enter. And there we go. We have made our first commit. So it says main root commit, and then this number here, 5F5, that's the hash for our commit. So if we ever needed to revert back to the commit, that's basically the ID for this commit, telling us like, hey, I need to go back to that commit. We wouldn't say added JavaScript. We wouldn't tell that to the computer. The computer recognizes the hash for the commit. So that's how we do it. And then next to it, just for us, it says added JavaScript. It says 1 file changed, 0 insertions, 0 deletions. That's because we haven't added or deleted any lines of code. And yeah, we created a new file. So there we go. We have our first commit. However, this is a lot of stuff to remember, and it can kind of get tedious to try and recall what letters to press and in which order and things like that. Well, there's a simpler way to do it. If you're in VS Code, you can go over to the left here, and you might have already noticed that there's this little backwards Y called source control. That is actually what helps us use our actual source control. So if we click on this, we'll see that there are a bunch of changes here that are untracked. That U means untracked. So this markdown file is something I created before. There's an index.html and the styles.css. Those are the two files we created just now. So rather than going through and typing git add, git commit, we could actually just go here and stage them manually. So if I click this little plus sign next to index.html, it now becomes a staged file. Same thing if I put it next to style.css. It's now a staged file. And then up here, that's where we can put our message. So we can just say added HTML and CSS. And then when we hit commit, it'll commit it. Way simpler than what we just did. So it's good to know both methods in case you want to use either one of them, but at least now you know the easiest way to do it. Another thing that we'll use Git for is to create branches. Branches are pieces that break off of the main branch of the tree. As we talked about before, the main branch is a stable, consistent branch that is always working. The branches that we create off of them are usually used to build a feature that may or may not work all the time. It has to be tested before it merges into the main branch and things like that. So to create these branches, what we'd want to do is actually use another Git command to create them. So what we type here in the terminal is, let's clear this off, and we'll type in git checkout branch, and just the B, git checkout -B. So that tells it to checkout means create for Git. I know it's a lot of different words, but you'll get used to it. Git checkout B, and then the name of our branch. So we're going to call this my first branch. And now we've created that branch, and Git has automatically switched us to that branch. So we've created a branch off of main. Does that make sense? We essentially have the main trunk and one branch going off of it. This will be really useful if we wanted to, say, add a whole bunch of features and then, develop them, test them, and then merge them back into main. That's something that we can do, and now we can take our time. As I said, if you don't remember all of this, don't worry about it. I'll link a piece of documentation below so you can refer to all of these commands and look it up as you go along.